My mother was explaining why Madison's $60,000 country club membership was an investment when the courier walked onto the patio. He didn't look at my sister, the golden child of Maplehurst, or my parents. He looked straight at me, holding a cream envelope stamped with the royal crest of Valdoria. For the first time in 33 years, the silence at our table wasn't because I had said something wrong. The drive to Maplehurst always felt like traveling backward in time. Not in a historical sense, but in a regression of my own maturity. I was 33 years old. I managed compliance audits for one of the most prestigious philanthropic foundations on the East Coast. I had a mortgage pre-approval letter sitting on my kitchen counter and a passport stamped with entry visas from 3 continents. Yet, as soon as my tires hit the manicured asphalt of my hometown, I felt my posture slump and my voice shrink. I became Claire the reliable, Claire the dull. Claire, the background noise to the main event that was the Brooks family. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was my mother. Gwen, we are at table 4. Don't be late. We have news. I didn't need to read the text to know the tone. My mother did not send updates. She sent summons. I parked my sedan between a Range Rover and a vintage Jaguar convertible. The brunch spot, a place called the Gilded Fork, was the current epicenter of Maplehurst's Sunday social scene. It was the kind of place where the eggs were organic, the mimosas were bottomless, and the judgment was heavy. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My blouse was silk, navy blue, professional but understated. My hair was pulled back in a low bun. I looked like what I was, a woman who read the fine print. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee and expensive perfume. I spotted them immediately. My father, Tom, was wearing his weekend uniform of a pastel polo tucked into beige chinos, looking every inch the successful suburban patriarch. My mother was next to him, radiating a frantic sort of energy, her hands fluttering over the table setting, and across from them sat Madison. My sister looked, as she always did, like she had just walked out of a sunlight-drenched commercial for lifestyle insurance. She was 27, glowing with a tan that hinted at leisure rather than labor, wearing a white sundress that dared a stain to even attempt an approach. "I'm here," I said, sliding into the empty 4th chair. "Claire, finally." My mother sighed. Though I was exactly on time, she leaned in for a quick, air-cushioned kiss near my cheek. "You look tired. Are you drinking enough water?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just a busy week at the foundation." "Arbor and Wren," Madison said, testing the name like it was a piece of gristle she wanted to spit out. "I still don't know how you stare at spreadsheets all day. I would die of boredom. Literally cease to exist. It is not just spreadsheets," I said, unfolding my napkin. "We ensure that grant money actually goes where it is supposed to go. It is about accountability." "Right. Accountability," my father said, waving a hand as if dismissing a waiter. "Very noble, Claire. But listen, we didn't bring you here to talk about work. We have something to celebrate." I braced myself. In the Brooks family, celebrations were usually zero-sum games. If we were celebrating, it meant someone had won, which usually implied someone else was losing. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy forest green velvet box. He didn't slide it to me. He slid it across the white tablecloth toward Madison. Madison feigned surprise, her hands flying to her mouth. "Daddy, you didn't—" "We did." My mother beamed, her eyes locking onto the people at the neighboring table to ensure they were watching. We decided it was time. Madison opened the box. Inside lay a heavy brass bag tag and a gold card. I could read the script from where I sat. Larkhaven Country Club. The air left my lungs in a slow, silent exhale. Larkhaven wasn't just a golf course. It was the fortress of Maplehurst's elite. The initiation fee alone was $60,000, and the annual dues cost more than my rent. It was a place where business deals were handshake-locked on the 9th green, and where social hierarchies were carved in stone by the pool. "Oh my God," Madison squealed. She held the card up, catching the light. I am official? You are official, my father said, puffing out his chest. We see it as an investment in your future. Maddie, you are starting your interior design consulting, and you need to be where the clients are. You need to be seen. Networking, Madison said, nodding sagely. It is all about who you know. I looked at my father. $60,000. When I had asked him 6 months ago for a temporary loan to help with a down payment on a condo, a loan I promised to pay back with interest, he had given me a lecture on the importance of self-reliance and the volatility of the housing market. That is a wonderful gift, I said, my voice steady. Congratulations. Madison. My mother turned to me, her smile tight. Don't look so sour. Claire, it makes sense for Madison. She is in a client-facing industry. She needs the access. Your work is, well, it is back office, isn't it? You don't really need to charm anyone to check a ledger. I felt the familiar heat rising in my neck. It wasn't the money, it was the story they told themselves to justify it. Madison was the protagonist, the one deserving of investment, of scenery, of light. I was the stagehand, expected to keep the machinery running in the dark. It is not just checking ledgers, I said, trying to keep the defensiveness out of my tone. I deal with international compliance. I work with legal teams in London and Zurich. It is actually quite social, just not in the way you mean. Madison laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. Claire, talking to lawyers isn't social. That is punishment. Besides, Larkhaven is different. Graham Vale is a member there. Graham Vale? I asked. The developer? The one and only. My father said, he is reshaping the entire downtown waterfront. If Madison can get in his orbit, her career is made. That is the kind of forward thinking you need. Claire, you play it too safe at that nonprofit. It is a foundation, I corrected, and we manage $2 billion in assets, and nobody knows who you are, Madison said, signaling the waiter for another mimosa. That is my point. You are invisible. But don't worry. Once I get settled at the club, maybe I can bring you as a guest. They have a nice quiet library you would love. She smiled at me, and I saw the pity in it. It was a weaponized pity. She needed me to be small so she could feel big. I looked down at my plate, at the cold eggs Benedict I hadn't touched. I told myself to let it go. This was the dynamic. It had been the dynamic since I was 5, and Madison was newborn. I was the responsible one, the sturdy one, the one who didn't need things. Madison was the flower that needed constant watering. I was about to make an excuse to go to the restroom when the front door of the restaurant opened. The chatter in the room dipped, then hushed entirely. Walking through the maze of tables was a man who clearly did not belong in a suburban brunch spot. He was wearing a slate-gray uniform with gold piping on the collar and a peaked cap tucked under his arm. He wasn't a police officer or a security guard. He looked like something out of a period drama. He scanned the room with professional detachment, ignoring the curious stares of the Maplehurst elite. He held a large, rectangular envelope in his gloved hand. It was cream-colored, thick, and even from 20 feet away, I could see the red wax seal on the back. My mother leaned in, whispering, "Is that a stripogram? Is it someone's birthday?" The man walked past the host stand, past the bar, and moved with unerring purpose toward table 4. He stopped directly next to me. My father frowned, looking up. "Can we help you?" The courier ignored him. He looked at me, his expression solemn. "Ms. Claire Brooks?" I blinked, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. "Yes? Delivery from the consulate of the Kingdom of Valdoria." The silence at our table was absolute. The silence in the rest of the restaurant was deafening. He extended the envelope with 2 hands. I took it. It was heavy, much heavier than paper should be. The texture was rich, like linen pressed into cardstock. On the front, my name was calligraphed in a sharp, elegant hand. "Ms. Claire Brooks. Sign here, please." He produced a digital pad. My hand shook slightly as I scrawled my signature. The courier nodded once, clicked his heels, and turned to leave. I sat there, the envelope resting on my placemat, The red wax seal depicted a lion rampant holding a scale. "What is that?" Madison asked, her voice losing its lilt. "I don't know," I said. "Open it," my father commanded. I slid a butter knife under the flap, trying to preserve the seal. But the wax cracked with a satisfying snap. I pulled out a single sheet of heavy cardstock, bordered in gold leaf. I read it silently first. "The royal household of His Majesty King Lucian III requests the honor of your presence at a private reception to be held at the Valdorian Consulate in Washington, D.C. This gathering is to honor our trusted partners in financial integrity and humanitarian stewardship. Your dedication to transparency has not gone unnoticed. Formal invitation to follow. RSVP. Required by the 1st of the month." I read it again. The words swam slightly, then sharpened. "Well?" my mother asked, her patience fraying. "What is it? A jury summons?" I looked up at them. My voice felt strange, distant. "It is an invitation." "To what?" Madison asked. "To a reception," I said, "hosted by the King of Valdoria." Madison snorted. She actually laughed, loud and harsh. "Okay, that is funny. It is a scam. Claire, like those emails about the Nigerian prince. They send those to everyone. They want you to send a wire transfer fee to unlock your millions." I looked at the card again. The embossing was deep. The gold leaf was real. And then I saw it. A small alphanumeric code printed in the bottom left corner. AW-REF-2024-ZK. It wasn't a scam code. It was an internal reference number. A W for Arbor and Wren. ZK for Zoya Kovic, the grant manager I had audited 3 months ago. "It is not a scam," I said softly. "Let me see that." Madison snatched the card from my hand before I could stop her. She scanned it, her eyes narrowing. "Valdoria? That is that tiny place near the Alps, right? This looks like a prop from a movie. Look at this font. Nobody writes like this." My mother leaned over Madison's shoulder. "Financial integrity? That sounds like a solicitation. Tom, they probably want donations. They buy lists of people who work at charities and send these out to make them feel special, so they write a check." My father nodded, leaning back and taking a sip of his coffee. "That makes sense. It is a marketing gimmick. Clever, though. Hiring an actor to deliver it. It is not a marketing gimmick," I said, taking the card back from Madison. My fingers traced the raised seal. "How do you know?" Madison challenged. "You think the King of Valdoria just happens to know who you are? Claire, be serious. You sit in a cubicle in Connecticut. You're not exactly on the diplomatic radar." I looked at my sister. For the first time, her tan looked a bit orange, her white dress a bit like a costume. "I did an audit recently," I said, keeping my voice low. "A compliance review for a grant involving a cultural trust based in Europe. It was complicated. There were irregularities I had to smooth out. This code at the bottom matches the file number." My father frowned. "Irregularities? You mean trouble?" "I mean, I did my job," I said, "and apparently they appreciated it." Gwen waved her hand dismissively. "Well, whatever it is, you can't go. It is in D.C., and it is probably on a workday. Besides, we have the welcome dinner for Madison at Larkhaven next weekend. We need you to help with the seating arrangements." I stared at her. "I am holding an invitation from a monarchy, and you want me to organize place cards for a golf club dinner?" Madison rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. It is obviously a mass invite for low-level employees. If you show up, they will probably try to sell you a timeshare in the Alps. It is embarrassing that you are even considering it as real." I felt a cold clarity wash over me. It wasn't just that they didn't believe it. It was that they couldn't believe it. If I was important enough to be invited to a royal reception, then their entire understanding of the family hierarchy was flawed. If I was special, then Madison wasn't the only star, and that was a reality they refused to inhabit. "I need to make a call," I said, standing up. "Claire, sit down," my father said. "The food is getting cold." I walked away. I didn't head to the restroom. I walked straight out the front door into the cool autumn air. My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone. I dialed Reena Patel. Reena was the general counsel at Arbor and Wren, my mentor, and the most terrifyingly competent woman I had ever met. It was Sunday. She never took calls on Sunday unless the building was burning down. She answered on the second ring. "Brooks, tell me this is urgent. I received an invitation." I said, my voice shaking. "A courier just walked into my brunch." "From the Valdorian consulate." There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. "Read me the text," Reena said. Her voice had lost its sleepy Sunday edge. It was razor sharp. I read it to her, including the reference code. When I finished, Reena didn't laugh. She didn't call it a scam. "Where are you?" she asked. "The Gilded Fork, in Maplehurst. Is anyone near you? Can anyone hear you?" "No, I'm in the parking lot." "Reena, what is this?" "Madison thinks it is a marketing thing. Madison is an idiot," Reena said flatly. "Claire, listen to me very carefully. That audit you did on the Aureline Trust, the one where you flagged the conduit payments going through the shell company in Delaware?" "Yes." I said, "We thought that was a simple mismanagement issue." "It wasn't. I made some calls after you filed your report. That money trails back to the Valdorian royal household, specifically, a faction that King Lucian is trying to expose." I gripped the phone tighter. "What does that mean?" "It means you didn't just balance a spreadsheet," Reena said. "You closed a loophole that was being used to siphon money out of their country. The king's advisors aren't inviting you for a party. Claire, they are inviting you because you are the American compliance officer who spotted the leak. This is political." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Political? I am just an auditor." "Not anymore," Reena said. "If they sent a courier, they are making a statement. They want you in D.C. to show that they are cleaning house. You are a symbol of their transparency. Is it dangerous?" I asked. "I don't know," Reena admitted, "but it is real, and it is big. Do not post about this on social media. Do not tell your neighbors, and for the love of God, do not let your parents turn this into a Facebook status. I will see you in the office tomorrow at 7. We need to prep." She hung up. I stood there in the parking lot, clutching the cream envelope. Through the window of the restaurant, I could see my family. Madison was laughing, holding her country club card up for a selfie with my mother. My father was cutting his steak, content, the master of his small, expensive domain. They looked like they were in a snow globe, perfect, contained, and fragile. I looked at the invitation in my hand. Trusted partner. I had spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter. The useful one, the one who fixed things so Madison could shine. I had audited the books of my own life and found that the return on investment was 0. I walked back inside. When I reached the table, Madison didn't even look up from her phone. "Did you report the fraud?" she asked, smirking. I sat down and placed the envelope next to my water glass. "No," I said calmly. "I accepted." My mother stopped mid-chew. "You what?" "I accepted." I repeated. I picked up my fork. "And I won't be able to help with the seating at the country club dinner. I have to shop for a gown." Madison lowered her phone. "You are actually going? To a fake event? You are going to humiliate yourself." "Maybe," I said, cutting into my cold eggs. "But I will be doing it in Washington, while you are doing it in Maplehurst." The rest of the brunch passed in a strange, thick tension. My parents exchanged worried glances, the kind they used to exchange when I was a teenager and insisted on reading instead of going to pep rallies. They thought I was having a breakdown. They thought I was deluding myself to cope with Madison's success. That night, back in my quiet, one-bedroom apartment, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and the invitation propped up on my coffee table. I replayed the scene at the restaurant, the way the courier had looked at me, not with pity, with respect. I thought about the timing. It was almost poetic. The universe had waited until the exact moment my parents crowned Madison with her $60,000 status symbol to drop this into my lap. It felt like a challenge. For years, I had accepted the role of the spectator. I stood on the sidelines while Madison played the game. I worked in the shadows while she stood in the light, but the shadows, it turned out, were where the real power was. That was where the money moved. That was where the secrets were kept. I picked up the invitation. The wax seal was cool to the touch. Madison was right about one thing. My life had been small. I had made it small so I wouldn't take up too much space in their house. But the king of Valdoria didn't know I was supposed to be small. He thought I was a force for integrity. He thought I was someone who mattered. I took a sip of wine. I decided I was going to prove him right. And if that meant outshining the sun in Maplehurst, then so be it. I pulled my laptop onto my lap and opened a search engine. I typed in Valdoria Politics Oraline Trust. The screen filled with results. I wasn't just an auditor anymore. I was a player. And for the first time in my life, I had the high hand. Monday morning at the Arbor and Wren Foundation usually smelled of floor wax and stale weekend coffee. But today the air felt thin, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I walked past the donor recognition wall, a massive installation of etched glass and brushed steel, and for the first time, I didn't just see names, I saw potential liabilities. I scanned my badge at the security turnstile. The beep was sharp, a digital accusation. Reena Patel was waiting for me. Not in her office, but in the glass-walled conference room usually reserved for board meetings. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man I had never seen before. Though his type was immediately recognizable, he was the kind of man who wore suits that cost more than my car, tailored to make him look dangerous rather than corporate. "Claire, come in," Reena said. Her voice was tight. "This is Elliot Crane, outside counsel." Elliot Crane didn't stand up, but he nodded. His eyes were a pale, watery blue, the color of winter ice. He looked at me not as a person, but as a data point. He was trying to fit into a regression model. "Ms. Brooks," Elliot said. His voice was smooth, lacking the jagged edges of urgency I felt in my own chest. "I have reviewed your audit of the Oraline Trust grant." I sat down, placing my notebook on the mahogany table. My hands were cold. The Oraline Trust. It was a cultural preservation fund based in Valdoria. 3 months ago, I had flagged a transfer of $2.4 million that had been routed through a series of domestic donor-advised funds before vanishing into a nebulous consulting firm in Delaware. "Is this about the invitation?" I asked. "It is entirely about the invitation," Elliot said. He slid a file folder across the table. It was thin. "The Oraline Trust is a charitable front," Elliot said, his tone conversational. "We believe it is being used by a faction within the Valdorian government to move capital out of the country before upcoming regulatory changes take effect. When you flagged that transfer, you didn't just catch an accounting error. You tripped a wire in a very expensive, very quiet machine." I looked at Reena. She was staring at her coffee cup, her jaw set. "So why invite me to a reception?" I asked. "If I cause them trouble? Why would they want me in the room?" "Because they need a shield," Elliot said. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "King Lucian is attempting to purge the corruption without collapsing his government. He cannot simply arrest the people involved. They are too powerful, too connected to his own court. He needs to starve them out. He needs to show the international community that Valdoria is partnering with American institutions of unshakable integrity." He pointed a manicured finger at me. "That is you. Ms. Brooks, you are the integrity. By inviting you, by honoring you, they are signaling to the banks and the oversight committees that they are on the side of the auditors. Not the embezzlers. You are a prop, a very necessary, credible prop." I felt a flush of indignation. "A prop. So my work means nothing." I said, "I am just a poster child for compliance." "On the contrary," Elliot said, "your work meant everything. It was accurate. It was brave. But in Washington, accuracy is only useful if it can be leveraged. They want you there to validate their narrative. The question is, are you willing to play the part?" I thought about the brunch yesterday, the way Madison had laughed, the way my father had dismissed my career as boring paperwork. I am willing. I said, "Good," Elliot said. He stood up, smoothing his tie. "Because if you decline, it looks like Arbor and Wren doesn't trust the Valdorian consulate, and we cannot afford that optic. Go to the reception, shake hands, smile. But do not discuss the specifics of the audit with anyone, not even the king." He left the room without a backward glance. Rena waited until the door clicked shut before she looked at me. "He is charming, isn't he?" she said dryly. "He scares me," I admitted. "He should." Rena said, "He is the guy they call when the problem is too big for the legal department. Claire, listen to me. This isn't just about Valdoria. That money came through U.S. channels. It touched American banks, American donors. If the Orlean Trust goes down, it is going to drag a lot of people with it." I nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" Rena asked. She looked tired. Her usually immaculate eyeliner was smudged. "You are walking into a lion's den wearing a meat dress. Be careful." I went back to my desk, but I couldn't focus. The numbers on my dual monitors blurred. I kept seeing the invitation. Trusted partners. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Send me a picture of the dress code requirements for your little party. We need to coordinate." I stared at the screen. Coordinate? My parents weren't invited. I typed back, "It is just for me. Mom, +1s aren't allowed." The response was immediate. "Don't be selfish. Claire, we are just thinking of the photos. If you are going to be seen, you represent the family. We should all look like we belong to the same brand. Also, Madison wants to know if there is a guest list online. She thinks she might know someone." I put the phone face down. The audacity was breathtaking. 24 hours ago, my job was a joke. Now, it was a family brand opportunity. They didn't want to celebrate me. They wanted to annex my achievement. They wanted to colonize my moment the way they had colonized every other aspect of my life. I opened the internal database, the massive, secure server that housed the records of every donor who had ever given a cent to Arbor and Wren. I needed to see the chain. I needed to understand how the money had moved. I pulled up the file for the Orlean Trust. The $2.4 million had come in as a restricted grant for cultural exchange and heritage preservation. It had arrived via a wire transfer from a holding company called North Peak Solutions. I searched for North Peak Solutions. It was a shell. No website, no employees on LinkedIn, just a registered agent in Delaware. But North Peak Solutions had received its funding from a bundle of smaller donations. Aggregated to avoid scrutiny, I started clicking through the donors who had fed into that bundle. Most were LLCs with vague names, Blue River Cap, Vista Holdings, and then I saw it. A donation of $50,000 to the Heritage Preservation Fund, dated 6 months ago. The donor was Graham Vale. I froze. Graham Vale. The man my father had practically worshipped at Brunch. The man who was reshaping the waterfront. The man who held court at Larkhaven Country Club. Why was a suburban Connecticut developer donating $50,000 to a murky fund connected to a Valdorian money laundering scheme? I felt a cold prickle of sweat on my neck. I typed his name into the main search bar. Graham Vale had been a donor to Arbor and Wren for 3 years. He gave to the gala. He gave to the annual fund. He was a gold-level supporter. I pulled up his profile. There was a photo of him from a ribbon-cutting ceremony. He was handsome in a generic, news anchor sort of way, thick graying hair, a tan that spoke of winters in St. Bart's, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I checked the notes in his file. Recommended for board cultivation. Introduced by. I squinted at the screen. The field for introduced by was blank. My phone buzzed again. It was Madison this time. You will never guess who I just met at the club. Graham Vale. He is totally charming. He asked about you. I stared at the text. He asked about me? I typed back, my fingers stiff. What did he ask? He asked if you were the Brooks sister who works at the foundation. I told him yes, obviously. He said you guys do great work. He offered to sponsor me for the Young Patrons Committee at the club. Mom is freaking out. She says we are finally arriving. I felt sick. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. I looked at the donation record again. $50,000 to a developer like Graham Vale. That was pocket change. But why funnel it through a pipeline destined for Valdoria? Unless he wasn't the donor. Unless he was just another conduit. I closed the window quickly as a colleague walked by. I felt like I was doing something illicit, even though auditing was literally my job. An hour later, an email arrived in my inbox. The subject line was stark. Urgent. Pre-reception briefing. It was from an address ending in at consulate.valdoria.gov. Ms. Brooks. Regarding the reception on Saturday, you are requested to attend a private briefing at 1600 hours on Friday at the Consulate Annex. Chief Attaché Sabine Cross wishes to speak with you personally regarding the protocols for the evening. This meeting is mandatory. Sincerely. The Office of Protocol. I read it twice. Mandatory. A reception was a party. A briefing was work. And Chief Attaché sounded like a title for someone who carried a badge, not a tray of hors d'oeuvres. I forwarded the email to Rena. 2 minutes later, she replied, "Go, take notes, agree to nothing without reading it." That evening, I didn't go home. I drove to the mall. It was a reflex, I suppose. If I was going to war, I needed armor, and in the world of the Brooks family, armor was made of silk and chiffon. I was standing in the dressing room of a high-end department store, struggling with the zipper of a midnight blue gown. When my phone rang, it was my mother. "Claire, are you home?" "We are coming over." "I am not home," I said, breathless as I finally got the zipper up. "I am running errands." "Well, hurry back. Madison has some old dresses she wants to show you. She thinks one of them might work for your thing in D.C. She says you shouldn't spend money on something new when nobody is going to be looking at you anyway." I looked at myself in the mirror. The dress was stunning. It fit me perfectly, hugging my waist and flaring out at the floor. It made me look tall. It made me look formidable. "I am buying a dress. Mom," I said. There was a pause. "Oh, well, don't buy anything too flashy." "Claire, you don't want to look like you are trying too hard. It is desperate." I hung up. When I got back to my apartment an hour later, they were waiting in the driveway. My mother and Madison. Madison was holding a garment bag. We let ourselves in. Madison said cheerfully as I unlocked the door, "You really should hide your spare key better. Under the mat is so 1990s. They swept into my small living room, filling the space with their noise and their perfume. Madison threw the garment bag onto my couch. "I brought my prom dress from junior year." Madison said, "It is that pale pink one? The one with the sequins? It is a little dated, but if we cut the straps off, it could work. It is very innocent. It suits you." "I don't need a dress," I said, hanging my new purchase on the coat rack, keeping it in the bag so they couldn't see it. "I found one." Madison walked over to the bag and fingered the plastic. "Let me see." "No," I said. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. "I am just trying to help. Claire, you have terrible taste. Remember that pantsuit you wore to Cousin Sarah's wedding? You look like a paralegal." "I am a compliance officer." I said, "I like structure." "Mom, tell her." Madison whined. "She is going to embarrass us. Your sister has a point," Gwen said, wandering into my kitchen and opening the fridge. "You tend to dress frumpy, Claire. We just want you to capitalize on this. Graham was saying today that appearances are everything in Washington." "Graham again?" I leaned against the counter. "You saw Graham Vale today?" "Oh, we had lunch with him at the club," Gwen said, closing the fridge after finding nothing but yogurt and white wine. "He is delightful. He is so interested in the family. He asked a lot of questions about you." "Actually, what kind of questions?" I asked, my voice steady. "Just general things," Madison said, flopping onto my armchair. "Where you went to school, how long you have been at the foundation, if you travel a lot for work. He was very impressed that you audit international accounts. He said that requires a special kind of mind." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. Graham Vale wasn't flirting with my family. He was vetting them. He was digging. Did you tell him about the invitation? I asked. Madison laughed. Duh. It was the first thing Mom mentioned. She practically shouted it across the Caesar salad. My daughter is meeting the King of Valdoria. It was hilarious. Graham looked surprised. Surprised how? Just surprised, Madison said, examining her fingernails. He got quiet for a second. Then he made a joke about how we have friends in high places. Then he bought us a bottle of champagne. He is so rich. Claire, like, legitimately wealthy. He told me he wants to introduce me to some investors for my design business. I looked at my sister. She was glowing with the validation of a powerful man. She didn't see the hook in the bait. She just saw the shine. You should be careful with him, I said. Madison rolled her eyes. Oh my God. You are so jealous. Just because I made a connection in 2 days that you haven't made in 10 years doesn't mean he is dangerous. He is a pillar of the community. Dad said so. Dad thinks anyone with a boat is a pillar of the community. I snapped. Gwen turned on me. Hey, watch your tone. Your father is working very hard to secure our standing at Larkhaven. This is important for us. Claire, for all of us. If Madison marries well, or builds this business, it lifts the whole family. You should be grateful Graham is taking an interest. I am not grateful. I said, I am suspicious. You are always suspicious, Madison said. That is why you are single. She stood up and grabbed her garment bag. Fine, wear your mystery dress. Look like a librarian. See if I care. But when you get to D.C., try to stand up straight. You have this way of hunching over that makes you look apologized for. They left in a flurry of slammed doors and exhaust fumes. I locked the door, then I bolted it. I sat on the floor of my living room. The expensive dress hanging like a ghost in the corner. I felt hollowed out. They had come into my home, insulted me, and left, all while handing over crucial intelligence without even realizing it. Graham Vale knew I was going to the consulate. He knew I was an auditor, and he had reacted with quiet surprise. My phone rang. It was late, past 10 o'clock. I looked at the screen. Reena Patel. I answered immediately. Tell me you are alone, Reena said. Her voice was low, surrounded by the hum of what sounded like a server room. I am alone. We just got a tip, Reena said, through the anonymous whistleblower portal. It came in 20 minutes ago, about the Oraline Trust, about the physical meeting points. Reena said, the tipster claims that the cash bundles aren't just digital. They are being finalized in person. Handshakes, envelopes, the old-fashioned way. Where? I asked. The tipster listed 3 locations, Reena said, one in Zurich, one in Georgetown, and one in Connecticut. I stopped breathing. Where in Connecticut? Reena? Larkhaven Country Club. She said, specifically, the private cigar lounge in the basement. The room spun. Larkhaven. The place my parents had just paid $60,000 to join. The place where Madison was currently being courted by Graham Vale. The place that was supposed to be their ticket to the good life. It wasn't a country club. It was a drop site. Claire? Reena asked. Are you there? I am here, I whispered. The tipster mentioned a name, Reena continued, a local facilitator who manages the club's access for the Valdorian contacts. Let me guess, I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Graham Vale. There was a pause. How did you know that? Reena asked. Because he just bought my sister a bottle of champagne. I said. I hung up the phone. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark street. The invitation to Washington wasn't just a career milestone, it was a summons to the other side of the battlefield. My parents thought they were climbing the social ladder. They didn't realize the ladder was resting against a burning building. And Madison? Madison was dancing in the lobby. I touched the glass. It was cold. I had spent my life wanting them to see me. Now, I realized, the most dangerous thing in the world was being seen. I needed to go to Washington. I needed to meet Sabine Cross. And I needed to find out exactly how much of my family was about to be destroyed by the truth I had uncovered. I wasn't just checking ledgers anymore. I was hunting. The Valdorian Consulate Annex in Washington sat on a quiet, tree-lined street in Kalorama, distinguishable from the neighboring townhouses only by the discreet plaque near the iron gate and the security camera pivoting slowly above the door. It was Friday afternoon. The air in the capital was humid, pressing against the windows of the taxi, but inside the annex, the climate was controlled to a crisp, sterile chill. I was led into a room that felt less like an office and more like a negotiation chamber. The walls were paneled in dark wood, hung with oil paintings of snowy mountain passes and stern-faced monarchs. At the center of the room sat a woman who looked as if she had been carved from the same marble as the busts in the hallway. Sabine Cross did not rise when I entered. She gestured to a leather chair opposite her desk. She was perhaps 40, with hair cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob and eyes that assessed my value in seconds. "Ms. Brooks," she said. Her accent was slight, a precise clipping of vowels that suggested expensive boarding schools. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." I sat down, placing my bag on the floor. The invitation said this was a briefing. "It is," Sabine said. She opened a folder on her desk. "But not about hors d'oeuvres or protocol. We assume you know how to hold a champagne flute. We are here to discuss why you are holding one at all." I straightened my spine. My mentor, Rena, believes it is because of the audit. Because I flagged the Oraline Trust. Sabine's lips twitched, not a smile, but an acknowledgement of a hit. "Your mentor is astute, but the situation has evolved. The Oraline Trust is not merely a case of mismanagement. It is a symptom of a systemic infection." She slid a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany. It was a flowchart, complex and dense, showing lines of capital moving from Valdoria through various intermediaries in London and New York before vanishing into the U.S. charitable sector. "There is a political faction in my country," Sabine said, her voice dropping an octave. "They believe King Lucian is too modern, too transparent. They wish to return to the old ways of governance, where the treasury was a personal piggy bank for the nobility. They have been siphoning funds to build a war chest. They use cultural charities as the vehicle because who dares to audit a heritage fund?" "I did." I said. "Yes, you did." Sabine leaned back. "And that presents us with a dilemma. If the king exposes this scandal publicly, he admits that his government has been compromised. It makes him look weak. It destabilizes the currency. So, we must be subtler. We must cut off the flow of money and signal to these detractors that we are watching them, without declaring open war. And that is where I come in? Precisely. By honoring you, an American compliance officer who caught them red-handed. The king is sending a message. He is saying, "We see you. We are partnering with the people who can stop you. You are a warning shot. Ms. Brooks, you are a symbol of the integrity they lack." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "I am a human shield." Sabine tilted her head. "You are a guest of the crown. It is a distinction few receive. But yes, your presence is strategic. We need credible Americans in the room to validate our commitment to transparency, if you are there. The faction cannot claim the audit was a mistake or a political hit job. Your face makes the findings real." She paused, her eyes locking onto mine. "But there is another reason we needed you specifically." She turned the paper over. On the back was a list of transaction origins. Highlighted in yellow was a transfer of $50,000 into the Oraline conduit. Dated 4 months ago. I leaned in to read the name of the originating entity. Brooks Orchard Holdings, LLC. The room went silent. I stared at the words. Brooks, my last name. Orchard. We didn't own an orchard. We lived in a subdivision called Maplehurst, but there were no maples left. Just saplings and manicured lawns. "What is this?" I asked, my voice sounding thin. "We were hoping you could tell us," Sabine said. "This entity is registered in Connecticut. It was one of the feeder funds that pumped liquidity into the pipeline you audited. When our intelligence officers saw the name, they assumed it was a coincidence. Brooks is a common name. But the registered agent for this LLC shares your home address," Sabine said. She pushed another document forward. It was a photocopy of a registration form. The handwriting was familiar. It was jagged, rushed, the loops of the letters wide and confident. Thomas Brooks, my father. I felt the blood drain from my face. The room seemed to tilt. My father didn't have international holdings. He sold commercial insurance. He worried about his golf handicap and his lawn maintenance. This has to be a mistake. I said, my father, he wouldn't know how to move money into a Valdorian trust. He barely knows how to use Venmo. Sabine watched me, her expression unreadable. Innocence is often the best camouflage for complicity. Ms. Brooks, we do not know if your father is a mastermind or a mule, but he is involved, and that makes your presence at the reception even more vital. Why? I whispered. Because if the daughter of the man moving the money is standing on stage accepting an award for stopping the money, it creates chaos in their network. Sabine said, they will not know if you turned him in. They will not know if he turned himself in. Paranoia will set in, and when they are paranoid, they make mistakes. I stood up. I couldn't breathe. You want me to be bait. For my own family, I want you to be a patriot for the truth. Sabine said coolly, or at the very least, a professional. You can decline. Of course, you can go back to Connecticut and pretend you never saw this. But the investigation will proceed, and eventually, the King's prosecutors will not ask nicely. She closed the folder. The reception is tomorrow night. If you attend, you are protected by the consulate's diplomatic interest. If you do not, you are just another civilian with a suspicious connection. I walked out of the annex into the blinding DC sunlight. I didn't hail a cab. I walked for blocks, my heels clicking on the pavement, the name echoing in my mind. Brooks Orchard Holdings. It sounded so wholesome, so local. It sounded like a lie. I drove back to Connecticut that evening, the 3-hour drive passing in a blur of brake lights and panic. I needed to see his face. I needed to hear him explain it away. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, the house was blazing with light. My parents were hosting. Of course, it was Friday. I let myself in the side door. The kitchen was empty, but I could hear laughter from the living room. I found my father in the garage, digging through the deep freezer for a bag of ice. Dad, I said. He jumped, dropping the ice. Claire, Jesus, you scared the life out of me. I thought you were in D.C. I came back. I said, I have to go back tomorrow for the event. But I needed to ask you something. He laughed, a nervous, barking sound. Could it wait? We have the Millers and the Davises inside. We are celebrating Madison's first week at the club. It can't wait, I said. I stepped closer to him, the smell of gasoline and old cardboard surrounding us. I saw a document today. Dad. In Washington, it listed an LLC called Brooks Orchard Holdings. The color didn't drain from his face. It flooded in. A flush of red crept up his neck. He bent down to pick up the bag of ice, avoiding my eyes. Oh, that. He said, that is nothing. Just some paperwork I set up for a side investment. Derek and I were looking into some agricultural futures. It didn't go anywhere. Agricultural futures? I repeated. In Valdoria? He froze. He stood up slowly, clutching the cold bag of ice to his chest like a shield. Who told you about Valdoria? He asked. His voice was no longer the jovial suburban dad. It was sharp. The consulate. I said, that LLC transferred money into the trust I audited. Dad, $50,000. Where did you get $50,000 to send to Europe? Lower your voice, he hissed, glancing at the door to the kitchen. Claire, you don't understand how these things work. It was a bridge loan, a favor for a friend who needed to move some capital quickly. It was a guaranteed return. Derek said it was foolproof. Who is the friend? I asked. Graham Vale? My father flinched. Don't say that name. Look, it is complicated. It is just business. Rich people move money around all the time. It is how the sausage gets made. You are making a mountain out of a molehill because you have been staring at spreadsheets too long. It is money laundering. Dad, I whispered furiously. And you put your name on it. I put my name on an investment, he snapped. And it paid for the down payment on the club membership, didn't it? It paid for your mother's new car. You think money just falls out of the sky? I am trying to build something for this family. For once, just once, don't be the police. Claire. Be a daughter. He turned and walked back into the house, the ice bag dripping onto the concrete floor. I stood there, shivering in the warm garage. He hadn't denied it. He had justified it. Be a daughter. He meant, be silent. The next day was the welcome dinner at Larkhaven Country Club. I shouldn't have gone. I should have driven straight back to D.C., but I needed to see the other end of the pipeline. I needed to see Graham Vale. The club was everything I expected and everything I despised. The dining room was a cavern of oak and velvet, smelling of prime rib and old money. The windows overlooked the 18th green, currently bathed in the golden light of sunset. My family was seated at a prime table near the center. Madison was the star, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car. Laughing at everything anyone said. My mother was preening, touching the pearls at her throat every few seconds. My father was drinking scotch, his eyes darting around the room, manic and terrified. When I arrived, wearing a simple black dress, Madison waved me over. Look who decided to grace us with her presence, she announced to the table, which included a few of her new friends, girls I recognized from high school who had never spoken to me then and certainly wouldn't now. Claire, you look so Arius, Gwen chided. Smile, we are celebrating. I sat down. The chair was plush, the silverware was heavy, and then Graham Vale appeared. He didn't walk. He glided. He was taller than I expected, with a charisma that felt physical, like a change in air pressure. He wore a navy blazer with the club crest on the pocket. Tom! Gwen! He boomed, resting his hands on my parents' shoulders. And the radiant Madison. Welcome home. He turned his gaze to me, and this must be the other one, the famous Claire. He extended a hand. His grip was dry and firm. I am Graham, he said. I hear you are off to rub elbows with royalty tomorrow. I am attending a reception, I said, withdrawing my hand. Graham chuckled. Modest. I like that. Your father tells me you are a bit of a compliance genius, a real stickler for the rules. He said it like it was a cute quirk, like being double-jointed. Someone has to be. I said. Graham's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. True, the world needs sheepdogs to keep the wolves in check, or at least to count them. He pulled up a chair and sat down, uninvited, but clearly the owner of the space. So, tell me, Claire, this Valdorian thing, is it purely ceremonial? Or are you actually going to be in the room with the decision-makers? Why do you ask? I said. Graham swirled his drink. Curiosity. We do a lot of international development. It is always good to know where the power lies. I was wondering, if you make a good impression, do you think you could facilitate an introduction? We have been looking at some properties near the capital. Having a friend in the embassy would be advantageous. The table went silent. My parents looked at me, their eyes begging, say yes, be useful. I picked up my water glass. I don't think that is how it works. Mr. Vale, I am there to receive an award for financial integrity, not to broker real estate deals. Madison kicked me under the table, hard. Oh, she is just being stiff. Graham, Madison said, laughing nervously. She loves to follow the rules, but she will come around, right? Claire? Graham stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Of course she will. Everyone wants to help their family. It is human nature. He stood up. Enjoy the dinner. It is on me. As he walked away, my mother leaned in, her voice a hiss. What is wrong with you? He just offered you an olive branch. He offered me a transaction, I said. You are impossible, Madison muttered. You are going to ruin this for me. The dinner service began. Waiters in white jackets moved like ghosts, placing plates of filet mignon and truffle mash in front of us. I couldn't eat. I felt like I was sitting in a trap. A young server, a boy no older than 20, came to refill my water glass. He fumbled slightly, splashing a drop on the tablecloth. So clumsy. Madison snapped. Watch it. I am so sorry. Miss, the boy mumbled. He reached across me to wipe the spot with a napkin. As he did, I felt something press into my hand which was resting on the table edge. It was quick, a flicker of paper against my palm. I closed my fingers around it instantly. The server moved away without looking at me. I waited until the conversation turned to Madison's upcoming tennis lessons before I slipped my hand into my lap and unfolded the paper. It was a receipt from the bar, torn in half. Scrawled on the back in shaky ballpoint pen were 6 words. Ask about the January meeting. Don't trust Vale. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked around the room. The server was gone. The January meeting. What happened in January? I looked at Graham Vale across the room. He was holding court at the bar, laughing, his hand on the back of another man's suit jacket. The man turned, and I recognized him. It was the mayor of Maplehurst. This wasn't just a social club. It was a gravity well, and my family was circling the drain. I excused myself before dessert. I told them I had to pack for D.C. You are leaving? Gwen asked, scandalized. Before the lava cake? I have an early train. I lied. Madison didn't even look up. Bye, Claire. Don't trip on the red carpet. I drove to the foundation office. It was Saturday night, and the building was empty. I needed a secure line, and I needed Elliot Crane. I called the number on the business card he had given me. He answered on the first ring. Crane, it is Claire Brooks. I said, I am at the office. I am 10 minutes away. He said, wait for me. He arrived wearing a hoodie and jeans, looking startlingly younger than he had in the suit. He led us into the conference room. What happened? He asked. Did you speak to Sabine? I told him everything. The briefing, the Brooks Orchard Holdings document, my father's admission in the garage, the dinner, the note. When I mentioned the LLC, Elliot's face tightened. He walked to the window, looking out at the darkened parking lot. I have seen that LLC before, he said quietly. Where? In an investigation involving the State Department. He said, 2 years ago. We were tracking a group of developers who were buying influence in zoning boards across New England. They were using shell companies to hide the bribes. Brooks Orchard was on a list of suspected pass-through entities. We couldn't prove it then. The money trail went cold. My father said he set it up with my uncle. I said, Derek Brooks. Elliot said, nodding, he has a record, fraud, embezzlement, low-level stuff. If Vale is using him, he is scraping the bottom of the barrel, or he needs someone desperate. My father is desperate. I said, he wants to be one of them so badly he would sign anything. Elliot turned to me. And the note? Who gave it to you? A server. A kid. The January meeting. Elliot mused. He pulled out his laptop and sat down. He typed furiously for a few minutes. In January, Graham Vale hosted a regional philanthropy summit at Larkhaven. He said, it wasn't public, invitation only. I moved to stand behind him. Can we see the guest list? No, but we can see the photos if they were tagged on social media. People at these things can't resist posting. He ran a search script. Images started populating the screen. Men in suits, women in cocktail dresses, the usual suspects of local power. Wait, I said, go back. He scrolled up. There was a photo of a roundtable discussion. The caption read, Planning the Future of Our Community. Sitting at the table, 3 seats down from Graham Vale, was a woman with blonde hair, listening intently, a notebook in front of her. It was my mother. She told me she was at a spa weekend in January. I whispered. Elliot zoomed in on the notebook in front of her. It was open. The resolution was grainy, but the logo on the page was visible. It was the crest of the Oraline Trust. My mother wasn't just coordinating outfits. She was in the room when they planned the pipeline. I felt a wave of nausea. My father was the signature. My mother was the strategist? No, that didn't make sense. Gwen wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was a woman who wanted to belong. They are using her. I said, Graham brings her in, makes her feel important, calls it a planning committee. She thinks she is organizing a charity drive. She doesn't realize she is structuring a laundering operation. Or she does, Elliot said gently, and she doesn't care. I looked at the photo. My mother looked happy. Happier than I had seen her in years. She looked like she mattered. This is why they invited me. I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Sabine said they needed a personal link. They didn't just pick me because of the audit. They picked me because they knew my parents were the American node. They are using me to spook my own mother. If you go to that reception, Elliot said, and your mother sees you on the news shaking hands with the Valdorian elite, she is going to panic, and when she panics, she will run to Graham, I said, and Graham will realize his cover is blown. Elliot finished. He looked at me. This is dangerous, Claire. If Vale feels cornered, he will cut loose the weak links. That means your parents. I have to go. I said, to D.C.? Yes. Why? Elliot asked. You could walk away. We can hand this over to the FBI right now. If I hand it to the FBI, my parents go to prison. I said, they will be the fall guys. Graham will have covered his tracks. He will blame it all on Brooks Orchard Holdings. My father signed the papers. My mother is in the photos. They are the perfect patsies. So what is your plan? I am going to Washington. I said, I am going to accept that award, and I am going to make Graham Vale so nervous that he makes a mistake before the FBI gets involved. I need to force him to show his hand. And how will you do that? I pulled the crumpled note from my pocket. Ask about the January meeting. I am going to send a message. I said, not to the king, to Graham. I took out my phone. I opened the browser and found the photo of my mother at the January meeting. I took a screenshot. Then I opened my email. I composed a message to my mother. Subject: exciting news. Hi, Mom. I just found out the guest list for the reception is even more exclusive than I thought. I might even see some of your friends there. I found this old photo of you. Is this the group you were telling me about? I will be sure to mention the January meeting to the attaché. She is very interested in local partners. I attached the photo. Don't send that. Elliot warned. You are poking a bear. I hit send. I am not poking a bear. I said, grabbing my bag. I am lighting a fire. I looked at Elliot. I need you to find out who that server was. The one who gave me the note. He knows something. I will try. Elliot said, but Claire, once you get on that train tomorrow, you are on your own. The Foundation can't protect you from your own family. I know. I said. I walked out of the office into the cool night air. The silence of the suburbs felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with secrets. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Madison. Mom is crying in the bathroom. What did you say to her? I didn't reply. I got into my car and started the engine. The dashboard clock read 11:11. Make a wish. I wished I was still just the boring sister with the boring job. But that Claire was gone. The new Claire was driving to Washington to burn down the country club. The email I had sent to my mother, with the photo of her at the January meeting, acted like a grenade tossed into a quiet room. The explosion wasn't loud, but the shockwave was immediate. I drove to my parents' house the next morning. It was Sunday, usually. The driveway would be full of cars, the kitchen smelling of bacon and coffee, the air thick with the performative relaxation of suburban weekend life. Today, the house was silent. The curtains were drawn. I used my key. The lock clicked with a sound that felt too loud in the stillness. Mom, I called out. I found her in the sunroom, a space usually reserved for reading magazines and drinking iced tea. She was sitting on the floral love seat, staring at the backyard where the sprinklers were rhythmically hissing against the grass. She wasn't crying, which scared me more than tears would have. She looked hollow. You sent that photo, she said without turning around. I walked in and sat on the wicker ottoman opposite her. I did. Why? She asked. Her voice was flat. Why would you send that to the consulate? Why would you try to hurt me? I am not trying to hurt you. Mom, I am trying to wake you up. She turned to look at me then, and I saw the anger simmering under the exhaustion. Wake me up from what? From finally having a life? From finally being included? Included in what? I asked. A money laundering scheme? Because that is what that meeting was. Mom, that wasn't a charity planning committee. That was a room full of people figuring out how to move dirty money through clean accounts. She laughed. A harsh, incredulous sound. You sound insane. Do you know that? You sound absolutely paranoid. Graham is a respected businessman. The people in that room were the mayor, the head of the school board, the president of the bank. You think they are all criminals? I think they are all useful. I said, just like you. She stood up, her hands trembling as she smoothed her skirt. Useful? Is that what you think I am? Just a tool? You have always looked down on us. Claire, always. You think because you went to grad school and moved into that depressing apartment that you are better than this town. Better than us. I don't think I am better. I said, standing up to meet her. I think I'm careful. And I think you are in danger. I am not in danger, she shouted. I am building something. For the first time in 20 years, I am not just Tom's wife or the soccer mom. I am on the board. I am organizing events. People listen to me. Graham asks for my opinion on floral arrangements and seating charts. I matter. I stared at her. It was so small, so pathetic, and yet so deeply human. She wasn't greedy for money. She was greedy for relevance. Graham Vale hadn't bought her with cash. He had bought her with attention. He is using you to make the fund look legitimate. Mom, he needs a respectable face. He needs a Brooks. And why shouldn't it be me? She challenged. Why is it so impossible that someone would value my contribution? You are so jealous. Claire, you can't stand that Madison got the membership and I got the committee position, while you just got a job, a boring, invisible job. I have an invitation to meet a king, I reminded her quietly. And you are trying to ruin it, she snapped. You are trying to turn it into a crime scene because you can't handle the fact that we are moving up without you. I realized then that I couldn't reach her. She had built a fortress out of her own insecurity, and Graham Vale was the knight guarding the gate. She wouldn't believe me because believing me meant admitting she was a dupe, not a partner. I walked out of the sunroom, in the hallway. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister who lived in Ohio. Claire, honey, Madison tells me you are having a hard time with the new club membership. Try to be happy for your sister. Jealousy is a green-eyed monster. We are all praying for your peace of mind. I stared at the screen. Madison. She wasn't just complaining. She was campaigning. She was seeding the narrative. If I spoke out, if I went to the authorities, the family would already be inoculated against me. I would be the unstable, envious sister trying to tear down their success. I didn't reply. I got into my car and drove away, the perfectly manicured lawns of Maplehurst blurring into green streaks. That afternoon, I received a call from a number with a D.C. area code. Ms. Brooks? It was Sabine Cross. Her voice was as cool and sharp as cut glass. I am here, I said, pulling over into a gas station parking lot to talk. We have finalized the program for the reception, Sabine said. You will be receiving the Order of the Silver Scale. It is a civilian honor for steadfast integrity and financial stewardship. An award. I said, a shield, she corrected. We are making it very public. The press release goes out tomorrow. We are stating that your vigilant oversight protected the Oraline Trust from external manipulation. External manipulation. I repeated. That is a polite way of saying theft. Diplomacy is the art of polite descriptions for terrible things. Sabine said, however, I must warn you, we have received intelligence that investigators from the U.S. Treasury Department may be in attendance. They are not officially on the guest list, but they have ways of being in the room. Why? Because they smell smoke. Sabine said, if they approach you, Ms. Brooks, you must be prepared. You cannot lie to federal agents. But you also cannot implicate the royal household in a scandal before we have finished our internal purge. So what do I say? You say that you are honored to be recognized for your compliance work. Sabine said, and you say that the details of the audit are confidential. Stick to the script. If you deviate, if you start naming names without evidence, we cannot protect you. I hung up. The award wasn't an honor. It was a spotlight. And in a war zone, A spotlight was just a target marker. When I got back to my apartment, there was a heavy envelope leaning against my door. It wasn't from Valdoria. It was cream-colored, expensive, but the texture was slightly different. I opened it in my kitchen. The Vale Foundation requests the pleasure of your company at a donor salon. Saturday, 7 o'clock in the evening. The Hay Adams Hotel, Washington, D.C., hosted by Graham Vale. I checked the date. It was the same night as the royal reception, the same city. My phone pinged. It was an email from Graham Vale, copied to my parents in Madison. Dear Brooks family, since you will all be in D.C. to support Claire, I thought it would be wonderful to host a private gathering beforehand, a little pre-game for our donors and friends. I have arranged for a suite at the Hay Adams. We can toast to Claire's success and discuss the bright future of Larkhaven. I insist on handling all travel arrangements. A car will pick you up on Friday. Warmly, Graham. I sat down at my kitchen table, my hands shaking. He knew. He wasn't just inviting us to a party. He was summoning us. He was moving the chessboard to Washington. By hosting a salon the same weekend, he was ensuring that he could keep an eye on my parents. He was ensuring that whatever I did at the consulate, he would be there, hovering in the background, holding my family hostage with champagne and promises. He was daring me to make a scene. I needed to know exactly what he had on them. I knew about the planning committee, but that was soft influence. I needed the hard numbers. I needed Brooks Orchard Holdings. I opened my laptop and logged into the state business registry. I had looked at the summary before, but I hadn't dug into the filing history. I paid the $50 fee to access the archived documents. I pulled up the Articles of Incorporation for Brooks Orchard Holdings. It was formed 3 years ago. The signatories were Thomas Brooks and Derek Brooks. Uncle Derek, my father's younger brother. Derek was the fun uncle, the one who always had a new business idea, a car wash, a crypto mining rig, a franchise restaurant that never opened. He lived in Florida now, or maybe Texas. It was hard to keep track. I scrolled to the funding documents. The LLC had been capitalized with a loan of $300,000. The lender was listed as Alpine Bridge Capital. I searched for Alpine Bridge Capital. It was a shell company based in Luxembourg. But in the fine print of the loan agreement, there was a clause about currency repatriation services provided by a bank in Valdoria. It was a bridge loan. Graham Vale, or his associates, had lent my father and uncle $300,000 through a Valdorian front. My father had used that money to invest, likely handing it right back to another shell company, creating a paper trail of legitimate activity. But here was the catch. The loan had a forgiveness clause based on performance benchmarks. If the LLC moved enough money, the loan would be written off. If they stopped, the loan would be called in. My father owed these people $300,000. If he tried to leave, they would bankrupt him. I grabbed my keys. I didn't call. I drove straight back to Maplehurst. My father was in the driveway, washing his car. He looked up as I pulled in, his face tightening. "Claire, I thought you were angry with us," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "I am not angry. Dad," I said, getting out of the car, "I am terrified for you." I walked up to him and held out my phone, showing him the PDF of the loan agreement. "Alpine Bridge Capital," I said, $300,000. He stopped wiping. The rag fell from his hand onto the wet driveway. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "Public records." I said, "Dad, tell me the truth. Did you spend the money?" He looked at the house, checking if Gwen was watching. "We didn't spend it," he said, his voice trembling. "Derek said we just had to hold it. He said it was a leverage play. We take the loan, we put it into the orchard account, and the interest accrues. We get to keep the interest. That was the deal." The principal was supposed to go back to the lender after 5 years. "And did it go back?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Well," Derek said, "he said we could reinvest it. In the club. In the lifestyle. He said as long as we kept the account active, as long as we kept moving funds when they asked us to, the loan was secure." "When they asked you to?" I repeated. You mean when they told you to transfer $50,000 to the Oraline Trust? He looked down at his shoes. It was just a transfer. Claire, just paperwork. Derek said it was tax optimization. Dad, I said, my voice breaking, you are laundering money. You are moving illicit funds for a foreign political faction, and Graham Vale holds the debt. If you stop, he calls the loan. You lose the house. You lose everything. He slumped against the car door. He looked suddenly old, the suburban sheen stripping away to reveal a frightened man who had gambled his family's safety for a country club badge. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear. Claire, I didn't know it was illegal. I just thought it was smart. I thought I was finally playing the game the way the big guys play it. The big guys go to prison, Dad, I said. Or they get killed. He grabbed my arm. You can't tell anyone. Claire, please, if this comes out, your mother, she will break. This is all she has ever wanted. The status, the friends. If she finds out we are broke and criminals, it will kill her. I pulled my arm away. She is already involved. I said, she is in the photos. She doesn't know, he cried. She thinks she is planning galas. She doesn't know about the money. I kept her out of it. I looked at him. He had sold us out. Not for malice, but for mediocrity. He wanted to be important so badly that he hadn't asked a single question. I can't promise silence. Dad, I said, I am going to Washington. Claire, don't. I have to. I walked away from him. He stood in the driveway. Water dripping from the hose. A man drowning in the shallow end of the pool. I drove to the nearest coffee shop, a generic chain place with harsh lighting, and called Elliot Crane. I found the leverage. I told him, a $300,000 bridge loan. My father signed it. Graham Vale owns him. Elliot let out a low whistle. That is classic. The golden handcuffs. They give you money you can't pay back, then force you to work it off by moving their cash. What happens if I expose it? I asked. If you expose it, Elliot said, your father is liable for the debt and the fraud. He signed the papers. Ignorance isn't a defense in federal court. Claire, especially not when he benefited from the proceeds. So I'm trapped. I said, if I speak, I destroy them. If I don't, I am complicit. There is a third option. Elliot said, what? You document everything. He said, you become the whistleblower who saves the investigation, but you have to detach yourself. You cannot warn them anymore. You cannot try to save your mother's feelings. Every time you talk to them, you are potentially obstructing justice. I felt a coldness settle in my chest. It was the coldness of clarity. My family hadn't just dismissed me. They had built their new identity on a system that I was ethically trained to destroy. My entire career, my boring job, was the antibody to their disease. I understand. I said, stop confronting them without a witness. Elliot advised. And Claire? Check your devices. If Graham is as sophisticated as I think he is, he might be watching more than just your parents. I hung up. I looked at my laptop. I had tabs open for Alpine Bridge Capital, Brooks Orchard, and the Valdorian Consulate. I closed the lid. I went back to my apartment. I needed to pack. I needed to prepare for the donor salon. When I walked into my living room, Madison was there. She was sitting on my couch, her legs curled under her. She had let herself in again, but she wasn't looking at a magazine. She was looking at my laptop, which I had left on the coffee table before I drove to my parents'. I had closed it, but I hadn't password-locked the sleep mode. She had opened it. Madison? I said. She looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. What is this? She asked. She pointed to the screen. I walked over. She was looking at a relationship map I had drawn using a digital whiteboard tool. It showed Graham Vale connected to Alpine Bridge, connected to Brooks Orchard, connected to the Oraline Trust. I closed the laptop firmly. It is work. Madison, it is not work, she whispered. It is us. She stood up. Her movements jerky. I saw Brooks Orchard. That is Dad's company. And Graham. Why do you have lines connecting Graham to the king? You shouldn't be snooping. I said, "Tell me," she screamed. Her composure cracked. "Tell me what you are doing." I looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the spray tan and the designer highlights, she was terrified. "I am trying to find out why our parents are suddenly rich." I said. Madison flinched. "They aren't rich. It is credit. It is all credit. You know?" I asked. Madison wrapped her arms around herself. I saw the bank statements. Dad leaves them on his desk. The balance is always zero at the end of the month. Money comes in, money goes out. It is a pass-through. I know what that means. Claire, I watch crime shows too, so you know it is illegal. I said, and you are still letting him buy you a membership? You are still letting Graham Vale parade you around? What am I supposed to do? She cried. Give it back? Go back to being nobody? Graham promised me he would invest in my design firm. He promised me a condo in the city. He is buying your silence. Madison, I shouted. He is buying you so that when the FBI comes knocking, you will smile and say he is a great guy. Madison stepped closer, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Please, Claire, just drop it. Just go to your party, get your award, and come home. Don't ask questions. Graham told me. He told me that people who ask too many questions end up losing their standing. He said accidents happen to reputations. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a warning, she said. She reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was cold. He knows you are digging. He told me to come here and see what you had. You are spying for him? I asked, pulling away. I am trying to save us. Madison sobbed. If you blow this up, Dad goes to jail. Mom has a nervous breakdown. And I lose everything. Do you hate us that much? Do you hate us so much that you would burn it all down just to be right? I looked at my sister. She was a child playing dress-up in a minefield. I don't hate you, I said softly. I pity you. Madison wiped her eyes, her face hardening again into the mask of the country club debutante. Well, save your pity, she spat, because if it comes down to you or the family, Claire, nobody is going to choose you. Graham is paying for the hotel in D.C. Graham is paying for the car. Graham is taking care of us. Who are you taking care of? She grabbed her purse and marched to the door. See you in Washington, she said. Try not to embarrass us. She slammed the door. I stood in the silence of my apartment. I realized then that the country club membership wasn't a gift. It was an entry fee. My parents had paid it with their souls. Madison had paid it with her loyalty. And my royal invitation? It wasn't just a piece of cardstock. It was a warrant. Graham Vale had invited the family to D.C. to control the narrative. He wanted to surround me with the people I had spent my life trying to please, hoping their pressure would crush my integrity. He was wrong. I went to my desk and opened the laptop again. I didn't delete the map. I saved it to an encrypted drive. Then I opened a new document. I typed the header, Incident Report, Witness Intimidation and Financial Coercion Involving Brooks Orchard Holdings. I wasn't going to Washington to be a guest. I was going to be the auditor, and this time, I wasn't leaving until the books were balanced. Washington, D.C. was a city of monuments, but as I walked up the marble steps of the Valdorian consulate on Tuesday morning, I felt like I was walking into a tomb. The air was thick with the scent of cherry blossoms and diesel, a cloying mix that stuck to the back of my throat. I was early for the final planning meeting, but the black sedans with diplomatic plates were already lined up along the curb like a funeral procession. Inside, the atmosphere was less like a party preparation and more like a war room. The grand hall, where the reception would take place, was being draped in velvet ropes. I saw men in dark suits sweeping the room with electronic wands, checking for bugs. I was ushered into a smaller parlor off the main hall. Sabine Cross was there, standing by a window, looking out at the street. Around the table sat 4 men I didn't recognize. They didn't look like party planners. They had the hard, weary eyes of people who read redacted documents for a living. Ms. Brooks, Sabine said, turning from the window. Her voice was tight. Please, sit. I took the remaining chair. These gentlemen are from the Royal Parliamentary Oversight Committee. Sabine introduced them vaguely, and, off the record, our colleagues from the U.S. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network will be attending the reception on Saturday as observers. I froze. The Treasury? They are not here to drink the wine, one of the men said. His accent was thick, his tone dry. They are here to see who drinks with whom. Sabine sat down, folding her hands on the table. We need to be very clear about the optics of this event. Claire, when you walk across that stage to accept the Order of the Silver Scale, you are not just accepting an award, you are validating the king's narrative. You are telling the world that Valdoria has purged its bad actors. But you haven't purged them, I said, looking around the table. You told me the faction is still active. That is why the Americans are watching, Sabine said. They want to know if this ceremony is a genuine commitment to reform or just theater. If you stumble, if you look uncertain, or if you contradict the official statement of rectified irregularities, the markets will react. The investigation could go from a diplomatic inquiry to a federal indictment. I felt the weight of the room pressing down on me. You are asking me to lie to the U.S. Treasury. We are asking you to be diplomatic, the man said. There is a difference. After the meeting, Sabine pulled me into her private office. She looked exhausted. The sharp bob of her hair seemed less severe, her posture less rigid. She poured 2 glasses of water and slid one to me. You look terrified, she said. I am terrified, I admitted. You have Treasury agents in the crowd and money launderers in the wings. And I am supposed to smile and pretend I fixed everything with a spreadsheet. Sabine took a sip of water. It is worse than that. Claire, the royal household is divided. Half the court wants to use this event to expose the corruption, to cut out the rot even if it hurts. That is my faction. That is the king. And the other half? The other half wants to bury it, she said. They want you to smile, take the medal, and go home so they can get back to business. They are powerful. They have deep ties to American finance. They are the ones who facilitated the pipeline you discovered. So if I speak the truth, I anger the corrupt half. If I lie, I betray the king and the Treasury. Sabine looked at me with a pity that chilled my blood. Precisely. You are the pivot point. Claire, everyone is waiting to see which way you lean, and I must warn you, the corrupt faction does not play by diplomatic rules. They play by survival rules. I left the consulate feeling exposed, as if the skin on my back had been peeled away. I checked into the Hay Adams Hotel, a place of old-world luxury that usually made me feel safe. Today, the lobby felt like a stage set. My parents were already there. I hadn't expected them until Friday. But when I walked into the suite Graham Vale had paid for, my mother was already unpacking. She was arranging her toiletries in the marble bathroom as if she were setting up a shrine. "Claire!" she exclaimed, rushing out to hug me. Her embrace was tight, vibrating with a nervous energy that felt electric. "We decided to come early, to support you." "To support me?" I asked. "Pulling back, or to supervise me." My father was sitting in the armchair by the window, staring at the White House across the park. He held a glass of scotch. Though it was barely noon, "Don't be like that," he said without turning around. "We are a family. Families show up for the big moments." He turned then, and I saw the dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He looked like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Where is Madison?" I asked. "She is downstairs," Gwen said. "Too quickly. She ran into a friend." "A friend? In D.C.? Well, you know Madison." Gwen laughed. A brittle sound. "She makes friends everywhere." Actually, it was a donor connection. Through Graham. He arranged for her to get a pass to the hospitality suite. I felt a sharp spike of adrenaline. "Graham is here?" "He has business in the city," Tom said, taking a large swallow of his drink. "He is sponsoring the Global Philanthropy Summit that is happening in the ballroom next door to your reception. It is a big weekend for charity. Claire, you should be happy. Our worlds are colliding." Colliding was the right word. A collision usually resulted in wreckage. I went down to the lobby. I needed to see for myself. In the center of the foyer, There was a digital placard listing the weekend's events: the Royal Reception of Valdoria, the Grand Hall, the Vale Foundation Donor Salon Hospitality Suite, the Lafayette Room. He was next door. He had literally bought the room next door. I saw Madison near the concierge desk. She was laughing, her hand resting on the arm of a man I didn't recognize. He was young, handsome in a slick way, wearing a suit that cost more than my annual salary. She spotted me and her smile faltered for a second before she plastered it back on. "Claire," she called out, waving me over. I walked up to them. "This is Julian," Madison said, beaming. "He works with Graham. He is showing me the ropes of D.C. nightlife." Julian nodded at me. His eyes were cold, assessing. "A pleasure. Ms. Brooks, we are all very proud of you. Graham speaks highly of your attention to detail." It was a threat, wrapped in a compliment, delivered with a smile, but a threat nonetheless. "I need to talk to my sister," I said, alone. Julian bowed slightly. "Of course. I will see you in the hospitality suite. Madison." He walked away, and Madison turned on me, her whisper furious. "Stop being so rude. He is an investor. He is going to help me launch my brand. He is a handler." "Madison," I hissed, "can't you see that? Graham sent him to keep you occupied, to keep you happy and quiet while he uses our parents to cover his tracks." "You are obsessed," Madison said, shaking her head. "You can't stand that I'm having a good time. Graham got us this hotel. He got us the car service. He is treating us like royalty, and you are acting like he is the mob." I grabbed her wrist. "Because he is the mob. Madison, just with better tailoring." She yanked her hand away. "Leave me alone. Claire, go practice your speech. Let us enjoy the one weekend where we actually matter." She stormed off toward the elevators. I went back to my room, my heart pounding. I felt isolated, surrounded by enemies who wore the faces of my family. My laptop chimed, a secure email notification. I locked the door and sat at the desk. The email was from a sender named Truth in Accounting. No subject line. I opened it. It contained a link to a secure drop folder. I clicked the link. A folder of images downloaded. I clicked through them, one by one. The first was a photo taken from a distance, grainy but clear enough. It showed a patio at Larkhaven Country Club. Graham Vale was sitting at a table with two men. One of them was my Uncle Derek. Derek looked tan and relaxed, a cigar in his hand. He was laughing. The second photo was a close-up of a document lying on the table between them. It was a transfer authorization form. The stamp at the top read, "Oraline Trust." The signature at the bottom was Derek's. The third photo was the kicker. It showed my father, Tom, walking up to the table. He wasn't laughing. He looked anxious. Graham was handing him an envelope, a thick white envelope. I stared at the screen, my father taking a payoff, or perhaps taking instructions. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my father. I called Derek. He answered on the fourth ring. "Claire Bear. To what do I owe the pleasure? How is the big city? I am looking at a photo of you." "Derek," I said, cutting through his cheer. "You, Graham Vale, and a transfer form for the Oraline Trust." There was a pause, a long, staticky silence. Then Derek laughed. It wasn't his usual booming laugh. It was dry, dismissive. "You have been busy, haven't you?" he said. "Who gave you that? Some upset ex-girlfriend of Graham's? It doesn't matter who gave it to me. I know about Brooks Orchard Holdings. Derek, I know about the bridge loan. I know you and Dad are laundering money. Claire, listen to me," Derek said, his voice dropping the playful act. "You are a smart girl, too smart to be this naive. You think this is just about some numbers in a ledger? This is global finance. This is how the world works. Money moves. People like us just help it along. It is a crime. Derek, it is an opportunity," he snapped. "Look at your parents. Look at that house. You think your dad could afford that lifestyle selling insurance? I did him a favor. I brought him into the fold. We are protected. Claire, Graham has friends in high places, very high places. Not high enough to stop the U.S. Treasury. I said, "They are here. Derek, in D.C., they are watching the reception." Derek went quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "Then you better put on a good show, Claire, because if you sink this ship, you drown your own father and your mother. You really want to be the one who puts handcuffs on Gwen? Think about it. Enjoy the award. Take the applause, and let the adults handle the business." He hung up. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. Let the adults handle the business. He didn't fear the law because he thought the system was rigged in his favor, and he was counting on my loyalty to keep it that way. My phone buzzed again, a text from Elliot Crane. "Meet me. Lincoln Memorial. Northwest Steps, now." I grabbed my coat. The afternoon sun was fading, casting long shadows across the white marble of the monument. Elliot was waiting by a column, looking out at the reflecting pool. He looked grim. He didn't say hello. He handed me a tablet. "Look at this," he said. It was a PDF of a compliance memo from Arbor and Wren, dated 6 months ago. The subject line was Risk Assessment, Orlean Trust Grant. I scanned the text. It was my memo, but the conclusion was wrong. Based on the review of the intermediary structure, no significant red flags were identified. The flow of funds appears consistent with standard international grant-making procedures. Approval recommended. I stared at the words. I never wrote this. I wrote the opposite. I flagged 3 distinct violations. Scroll down. Elliot said. I scrolled to the signature block. There was my digital signature. Claire Brooks. They changed it. I whispered. Elliot nodded. Someone with admin access to the Foundation's server went in and edited the file. They kept your signature but rewrote the findings. Who? I am tracing the IP, Elliot said, but it routes through a VPN. Claire, do you understand what this means? I looked up at him. It means I am not the whistleblower. I am the accomplice. Exactly. If this investigation blows up, Graham and his lawyers will produce this memo. They will say that you approved the transfer. They will say that your sudden discovery of the fraud now is just you trying to cover your tracks because the Treasury got involved. They are setting you up to take the fall. I felt the ground sway beneath me. My parents, my uncle, Graham, and now my own job. They had boxed me in from every side. If I speak out at the reception, Elliot said, I can present the metadata proving the file was altered. I can prove you are innocent. But only if you go on the record. Only if you name names. If I name names, I destroy my family. I said, and if you don't, Elliot said, softly, you go to prison for them. I looked at the statue of Lincoln, sitting in his chair, staring eternally at the horizon. Integrity. It was such a heavy word. I walked back to the hotel in a daze. The lobby was bustling with activity. Guests for the reception were arriving, diplomats in sashes, women in ball gowns. I felt like a ghost moving through the living. I went up to my room. I needed to think, but my room wasn't empty. My mother was sitting on the edge of my bed. She was wearing her robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked small. Mom, I said. She looked up. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. I need to tell you something, she said. Her voice was a broken whisper. I sat down in the chair opposite her. What is it? She picked at the fabric of the duvet. You kept asking why. Why we got involved with Graham. Why your father agreed to the loan. I know why. I said, for the status. For the club. No. Gwen said. She looked at me, and the shame in her eyes was bottomless. It wasn't for the club. Not at first. Then what? It was the debt. She said, what debt? My debt, she whispered. 5 years ago. I had a gambling problem. Claire, online casinos. I was lonely. You were gone. Madison was always out. I started playing. I lost track. I lost a lot. How much? I asked, dread coiling in my stomach. $80,000. She sobbed. I drained our savings. I took out credit cards in your father's name. He didn't know. I was terrified he would leave me. I stared at her. My mother. the perfectionist, the judge of all things proper. And then? I asked. Then Derek found out. She said, he didn't tell Tom. He said he knew a guy who could help, a guy who consolidated debts for people like us. Graham, I said. Gwen nodded. Graham paid it off, all of it. He told me not to worry. He said Tom and Derek could work it off with some business arrangements. He made it sound so simple. He saved my marriage. Claire, he saved my life. I closed my eyes. It wasn't ambition, it was blackmail. Graham Vale hadn't just seduced my family with luxury. He had ensnared them through their failures. He had bought my mother's silence with her own shame, and then used my father to pay the bill. And now? I asked. Now we are in too deep. She wept. Graham told us if we try to back out, he will release the records of my gambling. He will show everyone that I stole from my own family. He will destroy Tom's reputation. He owns us. Claire. She reached out and grabbed my hands. Her grip was desperate. That is why you have to be quiet tomorrow. Please, if you expose him, he will unleash everything. He will ruin us. You have to protect us. Claire, you are the strong one. You have always been the strong one. I looked at my mother. I saw the terror, the weakness, the years of hiding behind a facade of suburban perfection. She was asking me to sacrifice my life, my freedom, and my integrity to cover up her addiction and my father's cowardice. They didn't come to D.C. to clap for me. They came to beg me to die for them. I stood up, pulling my hands away. I am tired of being the strong one. Mom, I said quietly. Claire, please, go back to your room. I said, get some sleep. You have a big day tomorrow. She looked at me, searching for a promise I wouldn't give. Then, slowly, she stood up and walked to the door. I love you, she whispered. I didn't answer. When the door clicked shut, I went to the window. I looked down at the street, at the limousines arriving for Graham's donor salon next door. I thought about the edited memo. I thought about the bridge loan. I thought about the $80,000. They had built a cage around me, bar by bar, but they had forgotten one thing. I was the compliance officer. I knew how to find the structural weakness in any system. And I realized then that I couldn't save them by staying silent. Silence was the mortar holding the cage together. If I wanted to save them, truly save them from Graham Vale, I had to destroy the cage, even if the collapse crushed us all. I turned away from the window. I opened my suitcase and pulled out the dress, the midnight blue gown I had bought with my own money. It looked like armor. I would wear it. I would walk onto that stage, and I would decide, in the moment, whether to be the daughter they wanted or the woman I was. The grand hall of the Valdorian consulate was designed to make you feel small. The ceiling soared 40 feet overhead, painted with frescoes of cherubs holding scales of justice. The floor was a checkerboard of black and white marble that echoed under the heels of the 300 guests. I stood near the entrance, smoothing the fabric of my midnight blue gown. It was heavy, constructed of a silk that felt like water against my skin but held its shape like armor. I needed armor. The air smelled of expensive lilies and fear. At least, that was what I smelled. To everyone else, it probably smelled like champagne and opportunity. My parents were already inside. I could see them near the buffet, standing a little too close together, like teenagers at a dance where they didn't know the steps. My mother, Gwen, was wearing a silver dress that shimmered under the chandeliers. She was smiling, but her eyes were darting around the room, scanning for threats. My father, Tom, looked stiff in his tuxedo, clutching a whiskey glass as if it were a life raft. They were waiting for me. They were waiting to see if I would play the part of the grateful daughter or the executioner. I took a breath and stepped into the room. A hush rippled through the crowd near the door. Heads turned. I wasn't just a guest anymore. I was the guest of honor. I saw whispers being exchanged behind hands. That is her. The auditor. A man in a sash announced my name, but I barely heard it. I was focused on the far wall, where the Valdorian flag hung, a golden lion on a field of crimson. Beneath it stood Sabine Cross, looking regal and severe. She caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. It begins. I moved through the crowd. People I didn't know reached out to touch my arm, offering congratulations. So brave. A woman in emerald velvet murmured, "Such a credit to your profession." A man with a monocle said. I smiled until my face hurt. They didn't know. They thought I was being honored for solving a puzzle. They didn't realize I was being honored for walking into a trap. I reached the front of the room just as the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the podium. The ambassador of Valdoria stepped up. He was a tall man with a beard that looked like spun silver. He spoke of friendship between nations, of the unbreakable bond of commerce, and then he spoke of me. We live in an era where truth is often a commodity, traded for convenience, he said, his voice booming. But there are those who treat truth as an absolute. Tonight, we honor Ms. Claire Brooks for her steadfast integrity. Her vigilant oversight of the Oraline Trust ensured that our charitable endeavors remained pure. He gestured for me to join him. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. The applause was polite, rhythmic, a wall of sound. I accepted the heavy velvet box he handed me. Inside lay a silver medallion on a ribbon. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw my mother, clapping frantically, tears streaming down her face. She looked so proud and so terrified. She was clapping for her own survival, hoping that if she cheered loud enough, the lie would become true. I saw my father, who wasn't clapping. He was staring at the floor, unable to witness the moment his daughter was praised for the very thing he had sold. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. My voice was steady, though my knees were shaking. Integrity is a lonely virtue. It asks us to value the unseen over the seen. It asks us to protect the system even when the system tries to reject us. I am honored. I stepped down. The spotlight followed me for a moment, then snapped off, returning the room to the warm glow of the chandeliers. I needed air. I handed the velvet box to a passing aide. I couldn't bear to hold it, and slipped into a side corridor that led to the restrooms. The hallway was quiet, lined with portraits of dead kings. Claire. I turned. It was Madison. She looked different. The arrogance that usually defined her posture was gone. She was leaning against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering despite the warmth of the building. She was wearing a pale pink dress, the one she had bought for the country club launch. It looked childish now. "You did it," she said softly. "You got your medal." "I didn't do it for the medal." "Madison, I know," she said. She pushed off the wall and walked toward me. Her steps were unsteady. "I saw Graham tonight, before we came here." "Where?" I asked. "In the suite next door. The hospitality salon." He was angry. "Claire, he didn't yell. It was worse. He was quiet. He asked if I had seen your laptop. He asked if I knew what you were planning. What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't know," Madison whispered. "I lied for you." I looked at my sister. For the first time in her life, she was caught between the person she wanted to be and the person she was. "Why?" I asked. "Because he scared me," she admitted. She looked down at her hands. "He promised me a life upgrade." "Claire," that is what he called it. "He said if I introduced him to the right people, if I helped him soften the image of the club, he would set me up, a condo in Georgetown, a studio for my design firm. He made me feel like I had potential." "You do have potential." "Madison, you don't need him. I don't have your potential," she said, her voice cracking. "I am not smart like you. I can't read the fine print. I just wanted to be someone who mattered. I didn't know it would cost Mom and Dad their safety. I swear. Claire, I thought it was just networking. Networking doesn't involve bridge loans and offshore accounts," I said gently. "I know that now," she said. She looked up at me, her eyes wet. "Graham is here. Claire. He came through the connecting doors. He's in the back of the room. He wants to see who you talk to." "He is here? He is watching Dad," Madison said. I turned and ran back toward the grand hall. I stood in the archway, scanning the crowd. The reception had moved into the cocktail phase. Waiters were circulating with trays of canapés. The noise level had risen. I found my father near the heavy velvet curtains on the east wall. He wasn't alone. Standing with him was a man I recognized from the anonymous photos. He was short, balding, with a scar above his left eyebrow. He was leaning in close to Tom, whispering something. My father looked like a man whose roof was collapsing. He was nodding too quickly, his eyes wide and unseeing. He was holding his drink with both hands to stop them from shaking. Then I saw Graham Vale. He was standing 10 feet away from them, holding a glass of champagne, looking relaxed, benevolent. He wasn't speaking to my father. He was just present. His presence was the threat. He smiled at a passing diplomat, radiating the easy charm of a man who owned the room. I felt a hand on my elbow. Ms. Brooks, it was Sabine Cross. She steered me away from the door, into the shadow of a pillar. "The Treasury observers are ready," she said, her voice low. "They are in the library, down the hall. They want your statement." "Now?" I asked. "Now," Sabine said. "They have seen enough. They know Graham Vale is in the room. They know your father is compromised. If you do not walk into that library in the next 5 minutes and tell them everything you know, they will open a formal investigation tomorrow morning, and in that investigation, you will not be a witness. You will be a suspect." I looked at my father again. The man with the scar patted his shoulder, a gesture that looked friendly but felt like a frisk. "If I go into that library, I end my family," I whispered. "If you don't?" Sabine said, "Graham Vale ends them. Look at him. Claire, he is not here to celebrate you. He is here to ensure his investment doesn't speak." I looked at Graham. He caught my eye across the room. He didn't look away. He raised his glass to me. A toast. A dare. He thought he had won. He thought that because he held my mother's debt and my father's signature, I would be paralyzed. He thought integrity was a soft thing, a thing that broke under pressure. He was wrong. Integrity wasn't soft. It was rigid, and when you pushed against it hard enough, it didn't bend. It cut. "I am not going to the library." I said to Sabine, "Claire, you cannot. I am not going to the library." I repeated, "I'm going to finish this." "Here." I pulled away from her. I walked into the center of the room. I didn't run. I walked with the slow, deliberate pace of an auditor approaching a discrepancy. I headed straight for Graham Vale. He saw me coming. He didn't flinch. He smiled, turning his body to welcome me, expanding his circle to include me. "The woman of the hour," Graham announced, his voice carrying over the chatter. "The silver scale herself. Congratulations. Claire, we are all so proud." The conversation nearby died down. People turned to watch. The famous auditor and the prominent philanthropist. It looked like a photo opportunity. "Thank you, Graham," I said. My voice was calm, pitched just loud enough to be heard by the circle of people around us. "It is quite a coincidence seeing you here. I didn't know the Vale Foundation had ties to the Valdorian royal court." Graham's smile tightened at the edges. "We are citizens of the world. Claire, philanthropy knows no borders." "True," I said. "Neither does banking." A ripple of unease went through the group. My father, standing 10 feet away, froze. The man with the scar stepped back, vanishing into the crowd. I was wondering. "Graham," I continued, taking a step closer. "Since you are here, maybe you can help me with a compliance question. I have been struggling with a detail in the Oraline Trust audit." Graham chuckled, but his eyes were cold chips of ice. "Claire, this hardly seems the place for shop talk. Let us get you a drink." "No, this is the perfect place," I said. "It is about the January meeting." Graham went still, the glass in his hand tilted slightly. "The January meeting?" he repeated. "I am not sure I follow." "The meeting at Larkhaven." I said, "The one where the conduit was established. I have been trying to figure out why the initial transfer was routed through Brooks Orchard Holdings. It seems like such a clumsy mistake for a sophisticated operation. Why use a shell company with a family connection? Unless, of course, the goal was to create leverage." Graham lowered his voice. It was a hiss now, meant only for me. You are drunk. Claire, you are embarrassing yourself. Go to your room. I am not drunk, I said, and I'm curious. How did you know the compliance memo had been edited? Graham blinked. I didn't say anything about a memo. You did. I lied. Smoothly, easily. You mentioned it to my sister. You told her not to worry because the memo cleared everything up. But here's the problem. Graham, I never cleared it. I flagged it. The only way you would know there was a clean memo is if you were the one who uploaded the forged version. Graham's face flushed a deep, ugly red. That is absurd. I don't have access to your foundation's servers. No, I said, but you have access to the person who does. You paid off their gambling debt too, didn't you? Just like you paid off my mother's. It was a guess, a wild, calculated guess based on his pattern. He preyed on weakness. Graham flinched. The mask slipped. For 1 second, the philanthropist vanished, and the predator appeared. You listen to me, you little bitch, he whispered, stepping into my personal space. You think you can play this game? I own this room. I own your father. I own the mortgage on your childhood home. If you say another word, I will bury your family so deep they will never see sunlight again. He had said it. He had threatened me. And he hadn't noticed that the room had gone silent. He hadn't noticed that the ambassador had stopped talking. He hadn't noticed that Sabine Cross was standing 5 feet behind him, flanked by 2 men who didn't look like guests. I looked at Graham. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt a strange, cold relief. You don't own me, Graham, I said. I reached into my clutch. I didn't pull out a gun. I pulled out a USB drive. I turned to Sabine. Madame Attaché, I said, my voice ringing in the silent hall. I would like to submit a supplemental addendum to my audit findings. Sabine stepped forward. The crowd parted for her. What is the nature of this evidence, Ms. Brooks? She asked formally. It contains the metadata of the forged compliance memo. I said, it contains the loan agreements for Brooks Orchard Holdings, and it contains photographs of Mr. Vale meeting with the signatories of the fraudulent transfers at Larkhaven Country Club. Graham lunged for me. It was a desperate, foolish move. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. Give me that, he snarled. The 2 men flanking Sabine moved faster than I could track. One moment Graham was holding me. The next, his arm was twisted behind his back, and he was forced down onto one knee. The champagne glass fell from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot. Let go of me, Graham shouted. Do you know who I am? I am a guest of the Crown. You are a person of interest in a federal money laundering investigation. One of the agents said, pulling a badge from his jacket, Graham Vale. You are being detained for questioning regarding the violation of the International Banking Act and conspiracy to commit fraud. My father made a sound. A choked, strangling noise. I looked over. Tom was slumped against the wall, his face gray. My mother was standing next to him, her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Graham was hauled to his feet. He looked at me, his eyes burning with hatred. You ruined them. He spat at me. You didn't save them. You killed them. They dragged him out. The cameras flashed. The murmurs erupted into a roar. I stood alone in the center of the room, the USB drive still in my hand. Sabine walked up to me. She gently took the drive from my fingers. Thank you. Claire, she said softly, go to your family. I walked over to the velvet curtains. My parents were huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. Mom, I said. She looked at me. She didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She looked at me as if I were a stranger who had just set fire to her house. You promised, she whispered. You promised you wouldn't. I had to. Mom, he was never going to let you go. We could have handled it, she insisted, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. We had a plan. We were paying it off. Now everyone knows. The club, the neighbors. Everyone will know I am a gambler. Everyone will know we are frauds. You are free. Mom, I said, I don't want to be free, she cried. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be someone. She buried her face in my father's shoulder. I looked at my father. Dad? He couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the shattered glass on the floor where Graham had stood. I signed the papers. Claire, he mumbled. Ignorance isn't a defense. You told me that. I spoke to the agents. I said quickly, I gave them the loan documents. I told them you were coerced. I told them about the debt. They are going to treat you as a cooperating witness, not a co-conspirator. You won't go to prison, Dad, but you will lose the money. You will lose the club. He looked up then. His eyes were empty. Then I have lost everything. Haven't I? Madison appeared at my elbow. She had watched the whole thing from the edge of the crowd. Are you happy? She whispered. I turned to her. No. Madison, I am not happy. You got to be the hero, she said, her voice trembling with venom. You got to be the one with integrity, and we get to be the cautionary tale. That is what you wanted, isn't it? To prove that you were better than us? I didn't do this to punish you. I said, I did this to stop him. Madison looked at our parents, broken and weeping in the corner of a royal palace. It feels like punishment. Claire, she said, it feels exactly like punishment. She walked over to them and wrapped her arms around them, forming a closed circle, a family of 3. I stood outside the circle. Sabine Cross came to the podium. She began to speak, calming the crowd, spinning the narrative of justice and swift action. I turned and walked toward the exit. I walked past the velvet ropes, past the security guards, out into the cool night air of Washington, D.C. I still wore the medal. It felt heavy around my neck. I hailed a taxi. Where to? The driver asked. Union Station, I said. I looked out the window as the city rolled by. I saw the monuments, white and pristine in the moonlight. I had told the truth. I had balanced the books. I had kept my integrity, but as I watched the lights of the Capitol fade, I realized that the cost of truth was higher than I had ever imagined. I had saved my family from prison, but I hadn't saved them from themselves, and I certainly hadn't saved my place among them. I was the silver scale, cold, accurate, and alone. I took the medal off and held it in my hand. It was real silver. It was valuable, but it was cold, so very cold. Thank you so much for listening to During Family Brunch. Sister got the country club membership. I got a royal invitation. This story of ambition, betrayal, and the high cost of integrity was a journey to write, and I hope it resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please drop your city or country in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories. We post new, emotionally gripping dramas every week, and your support helps us keep writing. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Claire's choice. Did she do the right thing by exposing her family to save them, or was the price of truth too high? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep reading.